This lesson is organizing the Program.cs file for readability. The objectives for this lesson are to refactor Program.cs. We're going to eliminate hard-coded strings using constants. We're going to create some classes with extension methods, and we're going to move code from Program.cs into those extension methods, all with the goal of keeping that Program.cs file small and readable. Let's start out by creating a constants class. Right mouse click on your AdventureWorks API project and add a new folder called Constant Classes. Then right mouse click on your Constant Classes folder and add a class called AdventureWorks API Constant. And into this, we're just going to put one simple thing at this point, and it's simply a constant string called cores_policy that we're going to use to replace where this was hard-coded in Program.cs. Now this is in a different namespace, so if we open up Programs.cs, what we want to do is do a using on that AdventureWorks API's constant classes. Then we can come down here to the cores policy where we set that right here. And we can do ADVWorks API constants dot cores policy. So that eliminates that hard coding there. And down here where we also used it, we can do the constants there as well. And feel free to add more to this constants class. You could do things like where you're reading the AdventureWorks API, for example. So any places where you have hard-coded strings, numbers, things like that, take advantage of this constants class. .NET has a feature called extension methods, where we can add methods to existing classes. And the great thing is we don't need to inherit from the class, and you don't even need to have access to the source code. Extension methods are static. We create them in a static class, and you must have this class name as the first parameter. So this, the keyword, must be in there. So let's take a look at how to create some service extension classes and methods that we can use to, again, simplify Program.cs. Right mouse click on your project again and add another new folder. This one we'll call extension classes. We're then going to add a class inside of this extension classes called service extensions. And what we're going to put in here then is some extension methods to help us with cores. So here's what we're doing. We're doing a public static class service extension, public static iService collection, configure cores. There's that this keyword. And the iService collection is what we're passing in. So that's the services that we've been using in Program.cs. And then you can see I've added the code there from the Program.cs. I've added it right within this method. Now what's nice is that now that we have that, we can go back to our Program.cs, locate the cores right here. And what we can do is we can now take advantage of that new code that we wrote, and we can say builder.services. So we're still using builder.services. It looks like it's a built-in method. It just happens to be over in our extension class. The reason that works is because the services, if you look at it, the return value is an iService collection, which if you remember we did over here, that is what we are returning. And that is the this portion here in the first parameter of configure cores. So there we go. We've now taken code out of Program.cs. We've made it smaller and easier to read. Next, let's take the code out of Program.cs that allowed us to do the JSON configuration and add that to our service extensions class as well. Go back over to our service extensions class and let's add a using statement. If you remember, we had to do that before when we were adding the things for JSON configuration. And then we can drop in another method that you can see here, public static iService collection, configure JSON options. Again, the first parameter uses this on that iService collection. And then there is the same type of code that we had written earlier, where we reset the naming policy and we reset the ignore read-only properties. And now we've got that over here moved into this service extensions. We can now go back over here and we can change the code here in Program.cs and get rid of all of this. And again, make it a nice one-liner. Isn't this nice? Just a neat, easy way to cut down the amount of code and make things just a little bit more manageable. Not all the configuration we've done in Program.cs works on that services container, so let's create an MVC Builder extension class and configure our Serilog in there. So you see the code here on lines 37 through 49. That's part of builder.host. Go over to the extension classes folder, right mouse click and add a class, and we'll call it host extensions. And inside of here, we're going to create a public static class host extensions, public static iHost builder, configure Serilog, this iHost builder host. And now we can write the same code that we're seeing over there in the Program.cs. So that means we can come back over here and we can replace all of this code now with, again, a nice, simple one-liner. Next, let's create a Web Application Builder extension class in which we will then configure those global settings. What we want to do is get rid of anything that works with the AdventureWorks API defaults and move that over into an extension class. So right mouse click on extension classes, add a new class, and this one we're going to call Web Application Builder Extensions. And this code will actually be, again, a nice static class with our configure global settings. So you can see I've taken everything that deals with the AdventureWorks API defaults and I've moved it into here. That means we go back to the program. Now we don't want the repository one, right? That one we're going to do in just a minute. But now what we can do is we can replace the other lines of code here with that one line. So we have just a couple more. We have one that is going to create our repository method so we can move any classes. Right now we just have the one, but you can see that as things grow, you would add more and more repositories. A product repository is what we have right now. You might have a customer, you might have an employee, all these different repository methods. We want to kind of, again, place them into one extension method. So we're going to take line 24 here and we're going to move it over into the service extensions class. We'll create another extension method, add repository classes. And I'm going to put it at the top because I know I'm going to be going into this one quite a bit and adding more repositories as my application grows. Then over here, all I'm going to do is, again, create one single place where all my repository classes are going to be added. As you saw in that Program.cs, we have several router classes that we're adding. So once again, let's move those over into the service extensions class and create its own extension method. Back to service extensions. And let's add this one in here as well, where it's add router classes. And that way, again, we're just organizing things so that we can get rid of all of that code in Program.cs and kind of have some discrete areas where we're now going to be performing certain configuration options. Isn't that nice? Look at how much easier and more readable that code is now. Plus, if you come up here, you'll see a lot of these using statements don't need to be there. So if we right mouse click, we can say remove and sort usings. So we have cut down many, many lines of code inside of our Program.cs. One thing you should do is run the program just to ensure that everything still works. So you would run, and then if everything comes up here, you're probably pretty good to go, but you could try out each one of these and ensure that they all still work. In this lesson, we learned about extension classes and how helpful they are for organizing our code. We created a few extension classes and a few extension methods, and then we refactored the code in Program.cs to make it more readable. Coming up next, securing web APIs with JSON web tokens.